Welcome to Fair Farms, Standard F5.3. Maintain written agreements with labour hire providers, and Standard F5.4. Monitor workers provided through labour hire providers. Let's start with an overview of this module. In this module, we'll learn about the importance of labour hire provider contract, subcontracting, monitoring labour hire workers, and corrective action. Standard F5.3 requires that there be a written agreement in place which clearly outlines each party's responsibilities toward labour hire workers. It also requires that there be no subcontracting arrangements with other labour hire providers without consent. The standard also sets out a non-exhaustive list of the matters that should be included in the contract. Importance of a contract. The cost of labour is likely one of the most significant costs your business will bear. You may spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in ensuring that you can get your produce picked and packed at the right time. With so much at stake, it's just good business practice to have a written and legally enforceable agreement. There can always be disagreements about the terms of an oral agreement, but it's much harder to argue with what's in black and white. If your labour hire provider does do the wrong thing by their employees, for example, underpayment of wages, and regulators are asking you some hard questions about what you did when you engaged the labour hire provider, having a written agreement will help you in establishing that your business should not bear any liability. Further, the written agreement will help you access the information you need to monitor workers provided through a labour hire provider and when undergoing a Fair Farms audit. The standard sets out in very general terms what must be included in the agreement in order to meet the standard. How that is worded is up to you, or you may wish to get some external legal advice. The template included in the resources section is an example of a labour hire agreement that you can modify to suit your business. Fair Farms does not provide any legal advice, and the sample template may not suit your circumstances. Make sure the agreement is signed by a person who has the legal authority to do so. Usually that would be the managing director of the labour hire provider if it is a company. Subcontracting. The contract you have with your labour hire provider should make it clear that the supply of workers cannot be subcontracted to another entity without your prior written consent. For instance, the contract might state, the labour hire provider agrees that it may not delegate or subcontract out the services set out in the agreement without prior agreement of the host. The longer the chain of subcontractors, the greater the risk that the workers will be exploited. If that happens, then your business may share some of the liability. If your business is considering giving its consent to a subcontracting arrangement, then it must apply the same level of due diligence as it would to engaging the principal labour hire provider. If the subcontractor does not check out, then consent should not be given. If the intended subcontractor is not licensed in a jurisdiction that requires labour hire providers to be licensed, then consent should not be given. Before you give consent, make sure that the principal labour hire provider will have a written agreement with the subcontracted labour hire provider that meets the requirements of Standard F5. Monitoring labour hire provider workers. Standard F5.4 requires that you monitor workers provided through labour hire providers. This standard requires that you have procedures in place to ensure labour hire provider workers are receiving their lawful entitlements and their health and safety is being managed well. If the agreement with the labour hire provider states that they are obliged to provide you with evidence of compliance, then monitoring the labour hire provider will be an easier task. The agreement with your labour hire provider should oblige them to provide you with documentation in relation to their workers that provides evidence of the right to work, evidence of age verification, evidence of training, and evidence that the correct wages are being paid, for example, pay slips. If your labour hire provider provides you with documentation such as payslips, then you should verify the accuracy of the information. You can do this by talking to employees of your labour hire provider. Of course, the employees of your labour hire provider may not want to talk to you about their wages and conditions, and you cannot compel them to do so. However, there is nothing to stop you from asking questions in a way that may encourage workers to speak up about issues. If workers seem overly concerned about discussing issues with you, then this may be a red flag that something is not right. Bear in mind that cultural differences may mean that workers are generally reluctant to talk. If there is a language barrier, then find someone who may be able to act as an interpreter. Workers may be more inclined to speak up if they are educated about their rights. You can provide information to employees of labour hire providers during their induction process. They should be told about their employment conditions and piecework arrangements, where relevant, and that there is a process by which they can complain if the labour hire provider is doing the wrong thing. Corrective action record. What if the labour hire provider is doing the wrong thing? Standard F5.4 provides that when the requirements of a particular fair farm standard are not being met, then a corrective action record must be completed using Form 1FF. You will need to consider what action will need to be taken both in the short term and in the long term and record the action on the corrective action record. In the short term, you may need to discuss the problem with your labour hire provider and get them to address it. In the long term, you may need to look for another labour hire provider who might be certified by Staff Sure. Keep a copy of the corrective action record. Congratulations! You have completed the Fair Farms modules F5.3 and F5.4. It's now time to test your knowledge of standard F5 labour hire providers by completing a short quiz. Remember to view the resources for more information on this subject.